Hello, my wonderful friends. This is my November wrap up. It's going to be everything that I've read so far. Well, what? It is going to be everything I've read in November, but I'm halfway through filming a video that I'm filming half in November and half in December as the vlog, and so I've read half of the books for that video. They are here. If you don't want that video spoiled for you, then I will put them all at the end and you can skip that and find out my thoughts in the vlog first. But I'm really just trying to avoid keeping any more like secrets and also making my December wrap up like an hour long. So I'm just putting it all out there. I'm halfway through that Goodreads video. I also posted 2 videos this month that I've been working on since like spring or summer, so I didn't technically read them in November, but I told you about them in November, so they're in this wrap up. And then 1 video that I did fully film and post in November, so those books are here. The wrap-ups are getting chaotic, but here are my stats. This isn't really truthful, but it is what I'm talking about with you today, so everything's gonna be fine. You don't care. The dynamics don't matter. It's just about the books. First video was reading books that are similar to my favorite movies. So I read The Family Game by Catherine Steadman, and this is the story of a woman who is an author, and she's getting married to this rich man, and she goes to meet his rich family in their manor, and they really like games. So it takes place over the holiday season, and they spend like Thanksgiving together and Christmas together, and every time they gather they play this game, and our main character Harry feels like she's being a target of these games. She feels like they're a little more dangerous than the family is intending or implying they're going to be. And at one of these gatherings, her fiance's father gives her a tape recorder of a book that he's writing, and there's like some weird confession on it, and so she spends the book while she's spending time with this family trying to uncover this mystery. I gave it a 3.5. This is one of those books that I started out and got like halfway through thinking this is going to be a favorite book of mine. I'm going to give this 5 stars, and then it kind of went downhill. While I enjoyed so many elements of this, the main driving plot was incredibly predictable. The games didn't quite meet their full potential. The first one did, but the rest of them left a lot to be desired. I don't think this book was very satisfying. The pacing ultimately was a little bit off because you were spending so much time with this family and the scenes felt really drawn out sometimes, but also a lot of the plots and ideas put forth were cut off too early. I liked a lot about this. I would still recommend it, but it wasn't like my perfect thriller. But there really haven't been that many highly rated this year anyway, so that's fun. Then we have We Can Never Leave This Place by Eric LaRocca, which is a short horror dystopian novella, surrealist, trauma fiction. Those are all of the buzzwords. This is about this futuristic situation, but you don't get a good idea of the world because it's really insular and isolated in this family home, where we're following a character whose father gets like delivered his dead body to their door at the beginning of the book by this like group of weird individuals, and then as they're grieving and keeping his dead body in the house, people start to, or creatures start to arrive to grieve with the family, and it becomes a very uncomfortable and toxic environment. It's bleak, it's strange, it has beautiful writing. I will always love this author's like sentence structure and just the way that they say things. Adore the writing. That's what got it a 3. I don't think this felt fully finished, but that's often true of their novellas, and I've loved other ones. I think maybe alongside the gross elements, I wanted a more explosive moment or ending, but I liked what this book had to say, or what I think it was trying to say, and there's a lot you can think about afterwards, which is also something I would say about the next one, which I gave a 4. We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah Bervoets, translated by Emma Ralt. This is a book that I think I can acknowledge is circumstantial with my enjoyment. If I had gone into this like a lot of people seem to have, where it got recommended in a capacity where it was mentioned as like one of the most grotesque or gratuitously violent horror books, I might have been disappointed going into it, but just knowing this was going to be an exploration and a slice of life coming of age kind of story about this girl who gets a job as a post moderator on the social media website where she sees some of the most violent things, but that's not really the point of it. It's not all of the things that she sees. It's just her mundane life activities and relationships, friendships, sexual relationships with like coworkers and friends while they are doing this job. It leaves you with a lot to think about afterwards, a lot of interpretation that you can make yourself about what the book wanted to say, because it doesn't really say a lot. It just kind of ends, and that can be unsatisfying. I know, for a lot of people. It's like kind of about what this does to the psyche, having this type of job, but it's more just strange relationship dynamics. My favorite thing about it was the style of it. It's written as kind of a letter to somebody who is also interviewing various people who did this job and this big lawsuit going on, and how she feels like she is, or she should or shouldn't be involved in that. And then I read my favorite book for that video, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, which I gave a 4.25. Another one of those books that I was halfway through thinking, this could be a favorite. I could love this implicitly if it continues down this road. And unfortunately, it didn't get romantic enough. I didn't get enough scenes with the actual couple, like present day, to make me feel fully committed to loving this book. But I liked it a lot and I would absolutely recommend it. We're following a girl who works in the publishing industry, and her aunt passes and leaves her this apartment, and the apartment is just like known for being involved in time travel, and sometimes you'll go in it and you'll just be 7 years in the past. So you very quickly just, or she accepts that fact. And so when she goes into it one day, there's this guy who is 7 years in the past. They start up a little friendship relationship. Meanwhile, in real life, she's having a lot of career-focused conversations. There's a lot of career-focused scenes, and she's trying to sign new people and find authors, and there's something obviously connecting these two storylines. I liked it so much because it didn't feel cringy at any point, which is something I get from romance a lot, is like the ick very easily, okay? And because I wasn't getting that, I was thinking this is gonna be an all-time favorite. And I guess it is. It's one of my highest rated romances of the year. But I again wanted a little more of an explosive ending, not dramatic wise, but like a reveal or like a big decision. Things wrapped up pretty easily and simply, and like I appreciated that as a reader. But I just needed 50 more pages of them really being together. Next up, I posted this silly video where I read the books that inspired the Barbie movie or were seen in the Barbie movie. So I started out with The Wizard of Oz. This was just my excuse to read The Wizard of Oz. I have never read it. I'm sure you know the story of Dorothy, who is in a tornado, and she ends up in this magical world where she runs into a Tin Man and a lion and a scarecrow, and they have to take down the witch, and they have to go to the Emerald City. And it was pretty much exactly the movie. There were quite a few things different, but like the general idea of the story is the same. And I liked it just as much as the movie and gave it a 4. I also read another youthful book. This one's for teens. It's called Puberty Blues by Kathy Letty and Gabrielle Carey. And it's just about a group of surfer Australian girls and their coming of age in a situation where there's a lot of drugs and drinking and sex and pressure from everybody who hangs out on the beach together, and them wanting to be involved in that, challenging their parents' like morals and seeing how destructive this lifestyle can be. And then a perfect pairing for that was Reviving Ophelia, Saving the Selves of Adolescent Girls by Mary Pfeiffer, PhD, and Sarah Pfeiffer Gilliam, which was originally written in like the 90s and has been revised and added to a lot from this therapist, psychologist, what's she called? Oh, both. Therapist and clinical psychologist specializing in women trauma and the effects of culture on mental health. And she wrote about the difference between generations in the 90s, like originally written to parents who are trying to parent their adolescent daughters and the struggles that they go through, and how it's similar to what they went through, but also so different because, you know, the world is constantly changing and there are different pressures all the time. And this updated version is written with her daughter and provides even more insight into like current day adolescent girls and how social media and everything has created different challenges that people are facing. And it's a lot of experiences she has with individual girls that she's meeting with and the struggles that they are each facing, how she talked them through it and why she thinks this is such an issue, and how there's a certain point in women's lives where we go from caring about things and having hobbies and having interests and having our own personalities to suddenly this shift happening around puberty where we care so much more about what everybody is thinking and wearing and who's looking at me, and obviously challenges that come along with that time of being pressured into different situations and having trauma upon you. It was very insightful, very well written. I think both of them came at this with a lot of understanding that they also don't know everything and not every situation applies to everyone. This is just their own personal experience and recommendations. I thought it was great and I gave it a 4. Then lastly, I read Man and Horse by John Jennings, which I said in my video didn't have an audiobook. And apparently I just wasn't hunting hard enough because there is an audiobook for this. So if you watched that video and you took the recommendation from me because I gave it a 4, go check out the audiobook. Let me know if it's good. Basically, this guy is writing his story of traveling across America on his horse for the first time in the 70s. And it's super well structured. It's got that perfect balance of action and storytelling, like in the moment of the time that he had to, you know, get his horse ready and how they were preparing for this trip and how he had to figure out food along the way and how he was gonna maybe get mail along the way. And, you know, his first time sitting by the fire with Gizmo and all the things that Gizmo taught him along the ride, but then also a lot of perspective of his childhood and the way he grew up and why he thinks the way that he thinks and cares about the things that he does, and his perspective on the world and how time changes and people change and all the things that he's just like witnessed over the years. But it is mostly about that like actual story and all of the challenges, like the time he almost got arrested because he was walking his horse through a city and the people in that town didn't like it, and the time that the horse ran away, and the time he found a scorpion in his boot. And it's just like a nice tale, the exact type of memoir that I quite enjoy. Next up, oh my gosh, we've got this pile of books that I read from 1985 for reasons. It was a silly video idea. I didn't think I would end up with any favorites, and I didn't. So we'll run through them quickly. I read some silly nonfiction. We've got Men and Owner's Manual by Stephanie Brush, which I didn't rate, and it's exactly what it sounds. It's written to women in the 80s about, you know, modern men and how to manipulate them or how to like understand them better. It's written very tongue-in-cheek. It's very silly. Then I read Female Difficulties, Sorority Sisters, Rodeo Queens, Frigid Women, Smut Stars, and Other Modern Girls by E. Jean Carroll, which is, it started out sounding like it was going to be about like looking at other women in society and judging yourself and wondering, like just based on the intro, how other women get attention from men and how you shouldn't like maybe judge other people, or maybe humanizing different women who you see as something. And I think maybe that was still the intent. I don't know the goal of this because it was very strange. But essentially she just went on this journey around the States and sat down and had a different conversation with a different woman, like somebody who was at a modeling shoot, somebody who was, you know, at a beauty pageant, and it's just a conversation and not really like a piece of lesson from someone. It's not like she was going around asking, you're such a beautiful, unattainable woman, like beauty standards, blah, 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 blah. Let's talk about, you know, you as a real woman. Like, I don't know. That's what I thought it could be, but it wasn't. It was just like them sitting around and her talking about like what the girl in front of her was eating and how she was talking about how she misses her boyfriend while she does pageants. I think the intent was still to humanize people and to give you an insight into like a world you might never experience, because this is obviously before social media. But because none of the people who she talked to had any real insight or advice, it just felt like a real waste of a book. But perhaps if I read it in 1985, like it would have done something for me. I don't know what the world felt like as a person. But also, if I really thought about it, when I looked at those two magazines, the one from 1985 and the one from current day, even the interviews in them were so different because people were willing to sit down for much longer and read a 6-page article that was just paragraph after paragraph and very little question and answer or dialogue or things breaking up the page. It's just chunks of text. But because of the world we currently live in and instant gratification, magazine interviews are just structured so differently, and they're short and they're quick and they're very intentional with their like advice, probably also because of like media training and the things that people actually want to offer the interviewer and the reader. So like maybe this is great, it's not now. Then of course I read from Stephen King and his wife Tabitha King. This apparently was a sequel, which I did not know in the moment, and doesn't say that on Goodreads, is not put together in a section. But it does say a novel by the author of Caretakers, and I think that's the name of the first one, so I guess you get introduced to these characters in that. I have no idea. But in here, we're following this woman. Well, you're following this town of people, and there's just a lot of social dynamics and relationships going on that you're reading about that I didn't care about. And then the book turns into like a really violent kidnapping situation where this woman is held captive with her young son and being tortured. As much as I disliked it, and I just don't think that either of those two things going on could carry the novel, I'm still giving it a 2 because I respect what she was doing with it. I think like her intent was finally accomplished. It's just not what I typically like to read. And obviously she's drawing on a lot of real life stuff because the woman in here has a husband who is a writer and his screenplay is in here. And it was just really boring to read. I started skimming those sections. I think my only real takeaway was I found it interesting. There was a couple in here introduced somewhere named Terry and Linda. And those are my parents' names. And I was like, oh my gosh, how crazy. Then we had Pet Sematary, which was a reread for me, but I don't think I've read this since I was like 13 or 14. And it is one of the scariest Stephen King books. He said that, I've said that before. And it's about this family who moves to a town and there is a cemetery nearby where people leave their pets and supernatural things start to happen. And then there is a tragedy within the family and they decide to do certain things with the cemetery and see what the supernatural forces are going to do. There's also a lot of just like interpersonal, you know, relationships, getting to know your neighbors and like different people coming in and out of the story, introducing themselves. It wasn't the most engaging, but the actual horror elements of it are what brought it to a 4. Then I read these 3, which looking at them now, I think are so indicative of their time, maybe because women really needed to read about strong female characters and like to a fault. These women are all, or many of them are very headstrong and have such clear ideas of what they want their lives to be. And they don't take any shit from anybody. So I've got Brave the Wild Wind by Joanna Lindsey, something no one ever thought I would read. And I gave this like a 3.5 for a historical romance. It's very interesting. So we have this woman named Jessica who lives on a ranch. Her father passed and she gets the ranch, but she's been taking care of it like her whole life anyway. And then her mother, who has been like kicked out of the family for years, comes and brings other people with her and they all want to control Jessica. And she takes it upon herself to not allow that to happen and use everything at her disposal to fight against that control. But she ends up falling in love with Chase, who is one of the guys who comes to the ranch, and he is reluctant at first. I think they're both really reluctant to admit that they like each other, but then they get to know each other better. It's not like a sweet romance necessarily. There are some like cute moments between the two that I was feeling conflicted, like should I be feeling this way? I don't know, because he also is very controlling of her, and while she gets what she wants in the end, she gets there via him pushing her towards that. It was interesting, that's for sure. Then we have Full Circle by Danielle Steele, which I thought was going to be another like epic romance. That's not why I originally picked it, but at the halfway point, it seemed like that's the direction it was going, and I got fully on board. Another book this month that I was halfway through thinking, am I going to give this 5 stars? Like, this is wild. And then I don't know what happened. It turned out to be a quite different story and ended up following this woman who we meet, whose name is Tana, and she spends the book figuring out like what she wants in life. She wants to get an education. She wants to be responsible for herself based on her upbringing and the things that she's experienced. And then she meets this boy and their chemistry was just out of control. I loved it. I thought it was great. And then I thought, oh my God, this is turning into like this epic romance. How amazing. But instead, it just ran through her next like 30 years of life and all of the many, many relationships she got into. There was death, there was tragedy, there was war. I still appreciate what I think is the intent of this, which is the idea that you can't control everything, and as much as you plan ahead, so many things are out of your control. Life just keeps on moving, and you may think you like somebody, but then they go in a different direction, or you just don't end up together, but then it'll come back around and you'll get another chance. It felt like watching a movie montage, and it was quite unsatisfying once I wanted the relationship to be the focus of it. So I ended up giving it a 2, which I feel kind of bad about. Then this one was definitely the most like ruthless and desperate character that we saw. Her name was Kate, I want to say, and at the beginning of the book you find out, or you learn, that she's like this 90-year-old woman and everyone's coming to celebrate her life. But then you are also following for many, many chapters like all the other generations of her family. So her father going to like mine diamonds in South Africa, how he got into that, the wild things that happened there, and how he really fought for his own ownership of his life and his career and his treasures. So like every section will start with who we're gonna follow and the years that we're gonna follow. We've got her children, we've got her grandchildren, and it's just like all of these different dynamics amongst the family over these years. People who are money hungry, people who want to own this business, people who will take advantage of everything that they can. And it felt like an absolute soap opera. I've never read anything quite like this. It was completely over the top. It had like every ridiculous reveal, like twins and this person being like secretly evil and seducing someone for the family jewels, and like the unassuming villain, and the reveal that someone had schizophrenia, and like all of these things that were mildly uncomfortable once we learned them, but it was also like really entertaining at the same time. And I gave it a 3.75. Did I say what it's called? Master of the Game by Sidney Sheldon. That guy. And now lastly, we have the stack of what I've read for the Goodreads Choice Awards Challenge so far. I am reading one book from every section, every category, just something that I want to read. That's the only rules. Ah! Oh, my water fell over. Anyway, there will be a very long vlog where I talk about all of these. Let's start with Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang, a 5-star horror that feels lightly horror. Like, it's not big extreme scares. It's more insidious. So we have this woman who we're following, 2 different timelines, one where she is younger and she is at this what's it called, like music conservation conservatory. She's at a conservatory and her parents have sacrificed a lot for her to get to do this, but they want more for her as well. And then later on she's working at this spa, gets this job kind of out of nowhere. It's a short book, so it's very fast that she gets involved and gets, my words are leaving me today, indoctrinated, this is why I should script my videos, into this weird spa where they expect her to not only do her job, but take like the different medications and procedures and whatnot that they're offering their clients. And we watch as she slowly like takes on more responsibility. There's a tragedy that occurs in her life and she's kind of willing to do anything. And we watch her get into this very messy situation. There are uncomfortable body horror things that are uncomfortable because they're like kind of normal. It's like her eyelashes are growing, but they're growing at a speed that like she can hear them growing, and it's just like, ugh. There's uncomfortable relationships, there's uncomfortable sexual exploits, and yeah, once you learn everything that's actually happening and all the conversations come full circle about the beauty industry and consumerism and beauty standards, it's just a very well told piece of literature that I loved a lot. Let's go to something I didn't love as much. I think my least favorite so far is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, but I did give it a 3. I think it's fine. It's just, some of you warned me, and that's correct by you, thank you very much, that this was going to be a little more heartfelt than fun, even though it pitches itself as a fake dating fun time. I didn't have fun with it past like the first third because it just gets very intense between these two, and it's all about things that I know other people will find absolutely beautiful and heartwarming, like the sacrifice of relationships and that love will conquer all and that you really have to fight for your relationship. These two people are doctors and they meet and they don't get along, and then they start exchanging letters and they get to know each other, and then he asks her to pretend to be his girlfriend so his family can think that he's good because he's been going through a lot. And then he offers to give her brother his kidney because he needs a kidney. So there's a lot of like intensity here, and their relationship becomes very like sentimental and sweet and beautiful. But I don't want people to be crying and then sleeping together. Like, I don't want your first kiss to be when you're bawling your eyes out. That's just not the type of romance that I typically like. I've liked a couple. There have been a few that have been more heartfelt, but they equally balance the fun. And this is what I would be happy to read in general fiction, but not romance. Because I just want to feel like ooey gooey happy feelings. Anyway, perhaps that is why this one got a 4, because the romance was just like fun and it was just light the entire time. Even though it was YA fantasy, I don't know what was up with me. There's something with Rachel Griffin. I need Rachel Griffin to write some adult romantasy. I haven't read from the romantasy category yet. There's a romantasy category. But this was like YA romantasy. And I really like her books. This is the 3rd one I've picked up from her when I really do not read this genre very often. But basically there are these witches and human beings and they share land, kind of. They keep separated, and there are certain rules that witches have to follow in order to be allowed to stay by the townsfolk. And our main character, I thought it was Tana, and then I was like, no, I'm mixing it up with this girl. Nope, they have the same name. But her full name was like, I don't remember, like Maconsitana or something. She is going to marry one of the humans, and she is a witch. And before that can happen, she falls in love with a boy on the island who is also a witch, but he deals with dark magic. And nobody knows that this dark original coven even exists until she gets involved with him. And it's just like him showing her that there's more to life than what she is currently accepting. And I just love their dynamic. The flaw is that it moves way too fast. Like it's very insta-love, it's very tropey, but it also just has this beautiful language. And I like the intent of the story, and I had a good time. Now let's get into the 2 nonfictions that I've read so far. This was in the nonfiction category. This was in the humor category. How Far the Light Reaches by Sabrina Imbler is a series of essays where they talk about their identity as a queer person. They talk about trans identity. They talk about being mixed race and how that can be connected to the experiences that they see as, what's their like official job title? As a science journalist and writer. So like examples, how there's certain shellfish who can like leave their shell behind and find another one, and how that ties into figuring out who you are as an adult and your sexual identity or your gender identity, and being able to find different things that represent you, or feeling like you can express yourself in various ways. Or there's talk of like immigration and family history being passed down. There's also this idea of immortality, and I learned about these jellyfish and how they are seen as creatures who like can reverse age, and how scientists like will experiment on them. I gave it a 4. I wouldn't say like at any point the writing itself felt impressive, like did anything for me. I just can really appreciate how it was structured and the things that they wanted to get across. And then with Strong Female Character by Fern Brady, I also gave this one a 4. This is Fern's story. It's in the humor category. It's not funny. She definitely gets into some situations that you could see as a little wacky because of just her personality, because of her autism. She is not seeing social cues the way that maybe you would, or the people in these scenarios do. And so she comes across to other people differently than how she thinks, and she is just navigating life. And it's about being diagnosed later in life, constantly reflecting on how things would have been easier or better if she had grown up with the understanding of who she really was, and didn't end up getting put on various different medications or sent to different institutions because people thought that she had something else going on with her. There's also just the potential of a lot of teachings for people who don't understand like what meltdowns look like and what it could potentially feel like to be in this body and in this mind. We go through a good portion of her life and all the things that she's experienced, homelessness and different careers. She was a stripper. There was a lot of like interesting stories she had to tell, and I liked it. Then we've got Evil Eye by Etaf Rum, and this is a book I gave a 3. It was in the general fiction category. It follows this woman who is really struggling, like the way that I'm struggling to speak. the thing is, she feels like she should be grateful and happy with everything in her life. Her husband has let her continue her education, have a career. She has certain like cultural expectations placed upon her. Her family is from Palestine and they've sacrificed a lot. They've gone through a lot of tragedy, and her living in America, she doesn't really feel like she belongs a lot of the time, but she also doesn't feel like she belongs when she goes back to Palestine. But she also feels this need to be grateful for everything and thankful for her children and just be happy with the career that she has, even though she doesn't feel like she is living up to her full like potential, and she doesn't get a lot of opportunities to go out and see the world and do the things that she really wants. And every time she brings it up, her husband is like generally supportive, but it just never really works out for her. So she's struggling so much in this current situation in life because she feels like she can't fight for more, but does she even deserve more? And the reason I'm talking about that and not the plot is because like that is the plot. The whole book is her grappling with this. It's a lot of dialogue between her and her husband. It's very exhausting to read because I'm sure it's an exhausting situation to be in. And so the writing reflects the mindset of the character. But I needed the plot to like actually move somewhere. She gets an opportunity to maybe go travel, and that doesn't pan out. And I think that's what really like flips the switch for her, that she needs a change. But it's not until like the end of the book that she really decides and finds the support to actually get these changes done. And so we are reading a really raw and vulnerable and honest feeling story of this woman that I respect so much. But as far as a book and an experience, it just was like generally okay. So I gave it a 3. While I think it's important for women to get to like read that and maybe connect and feel like they also could have this change in their life. But I just would have liked to see her more like after the fact and thriving. Then I read Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. This is a story of a family whose father and husband, that man in the household, what's he called? I don't remember. But he goes hiking with one of the children. There are 3 siblings in this family, and the youngest one has autism and Angelman syndrome. And so when they go hiking and that child comes back to the home alone, the rest of the family is like, he never would have left that child. Like something horrific must have happened, but that child is nonverbal and doesn't communicate in a way that other people can understand. So it's them trying to figure out what happened, and it's focused on the whole family and their relationships, like building up to that day when he disappeared, the moments afterwards where they're all coming together and trying to work together to figure stuff out. There's various reveals as they like go digging through the father's stuff and trying to figure out what he was up to. Because maybe he has some secrets, because in mystery books, like, you know, the person who goes missing always had something going on that might solve their disappearance. And I just think the story was done with a lot of care and attention to detail and desire for education and representation. I gave it a 4. I think it's because of the way that the story is told. And also if you go into this like expecting a wild mystery thriller, you might be disappointed. But if you like literary fiction with a mystery that is driving the plot, you could like this. But the main character, the daughter in the family that we're following and we're in her mind, she is just like exploring every statistic that comes into her mind throughout the entire book. There are like footnotes, there are articles, there's a lot of her just going, what's the statistic likelihood of this having happened to him, or this having happened to him, or this having happened to him. And just really internal, even though the book only takes place over a couple days, it's not like just about the search efforts. It's about her considering every angle and every possibility and finding various research that her father's left behind, and her reading it and dissecting it. It was very interesting, though not the most exciting. So that's why my rating was where it's at. And then I'm ending it because I just want to tell you about one of the best books that I've read. It's Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I read this and gave it a 4.5 and then had a live show with my channel members where we were going to talk about it, and I went through again to pull out like my favorite quotes and to tab various things I wanted to talk about, and ended up basically just rereading the entire book and then giving it a 5. This is a story of Emily. She is, I don't know if it says how old she is. I feel like she's in her 30s, and she is creating this encyclopedia of fairies, and she has this academic rival named Wendell who they don't really like each other. They don't get along. They're both after something similar. There's this conference that like they're fighting to get invited to get to speak at, to get to be in the room with all of these other scientists and academics. And quickly in the book, they end up on this adventure together because they are researching certain fairy lore and they have to go on these like various little adventures. It's all very light. Intense things are occasionally happening, so I wouldn't put it in cozy fantasy. I'd put it in light fantasy. But because of the way it's told after the fact and you're reading her field notes from the situation, you know that like everything is going to turn out all right in the end. And I know that this romance will not work for everyone because it's not really a romance, yet it focuses so much on these two characters and their like budding whatever. And even if they don't turn into anything by the end, I just am so in love with their love that they can't even admit that they have. It reminded me a bit of Veronica Speedwell. It reminded me a bit of Half a Soul. There are moments where they have to like save each other and they have to open up to each other and be vulnerable, but also her research never takes a back seat. She's always doing things with the goal of more education. So she will do some stupid things, even though she's a very intelligent woman, in the pursuit of understanding. And also she is a relatively cold individual and the townsfolk don't really want her there, kind of taking all of their lore and just putting them as a footnote in their book. But she gets like invited into the group eventually and they all work together for common goals. And it was just so sweet. There's a lot of like pining for the reader, not even necessarily from them. But so many of my friends have this so lowly rated on Goodreads that it's devastating. But the live show went so well and so many people ended up loving this alongside me, so I'm so glad I picked it. And also, we're reading the second book as our Besties Book Club for spring next year. So if you feel like joining my membership, the link is always down below. And that's everything that I read in November, but also have been reading for months. And I feel like I'm finally caught up on updating you about a lot of things. I've now posted 2 of 4 videos that I've been filming for a good chunk of the year. I actually don't know if the 4th one's ever actually going to come out. It depends if I get a 5-star romance, so I might just scrap that entire vlog. But regardless, you'll hear about those books in my December wrap up. And other than that, I'll see you next time with another video soon.